The wind off the north Atlantic didn't just blow through the coastal town of Oakhaven, it bit. It was a wet, salt-heavy cold that seeped into the marrow of one's bones. The kind of weather that made the residents of the English coast pull their wool, cardigans tighter, and check the seals on their windows. By mid-January, the sky had turned the color of a bruised plum, and the first flakes of a predicted historic blizzard began to dance in the yellow glow of the street lamps. Elias Thorne, 68 years old and possessing a pair of knees that predicted the weather, more accurately than any meteorologist, stood behind the triple-paned glass of the St. Jude's Hospital entrance. As the head of night security, a title that mostly involved checking door locks and directing lost visitors, Elias spent a lot of time observing the world through glass. He saw the ambulance bays, the swirling sleet, and the empty parking lots. But for 3 days, he had seen something else. Outside, precisely 12 feet from the sliding glass doors, sat a German shepherd. He was an old dog, his muzzle white as the snow beginning to pile on his shoulders. He didn't pace, he didn't howl. He simply sat, his haunches tucked against the freezing concrete, his amber eyes fixed upward at a specific window on the second floor. Still there, is he? Elias didn't need to turn to know it was Sarah, a night shift nurse who had spent 30 years walking these corridors. She carried 2 cardboard cups of tea, the steam rising in thin ribbons. "Hasn't moved an inch," Elias murmured, taking the cup. His hands, gnarled by a lifetime of carpentry before he'd taken this easy retirement job, welcomed the heat. 3 days, Sarah, through the sleet, the gale, and now this. He's got a layer of frost on him like a decorative cake. He came in with the boy, Sarah said, her voice dropping to that hushed tone hospital staff used when discussing the quiet rooms in the pediatric wing. Leo, the accident on the Blackwood Pond, the dog was the one who pulled him to the edge of the ice, or so the paramedic said. He stayed right by the stretcher until the helicopter took off. Then he must have tracked the scent or the sound all the way here. Elias looked at the dog. He knew that look. It was the look of a sentry who hadn't been relieved of his post. He's going to freeze, Sarah. The temperature is dropping to 10 below tonight. If the wind doesn't get him, the damp will. Management wants him gone, Elias, she sighed. The administrator saw him this morning. Said it was a sanitation and safety risk. They called animal control an hour ago. Elias felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in years. A quiet, burning indignation. He looked at his watch. 8:00 p.m. The blizzard was officially closing in. Animal control won't make it through the drifts on the coast road. Not tonight. He set his tea down. I'm going out there. The transition from the climate-controlled lobby to the exterior was like stepping into a wall of needles. The wind whipped the snow into white funnels. Elias limped across the pavement, his boots crunching on the fresh powder. The dog didn't growl as he approached. He didn't even flinch. He just shifted his gaze for a fraction of a second to acknowledge the man, then returned it to the second floor. Up there in room 204, a 7-year-old boy lay beneath a tangle of tubes and wires, his heart beating a rhythm as slow and cold as the winter outside. Easy, big fella, Elias rasped, his breath hitching in the cold. I'm not here to move you, just here. He reached out a gloved hand. The dog's fur was stiff with ice. Underneath, Elias could feel the rhythmic shivering of a body trying desperately to maintain its core temperature. The dog, whom the intake papers had listed as Max, gave a small, weary wag of his tail. It wasn't a happy wag. It was a polite recognition of a fellow traveler in the dark. Elias knelt, his joints screaming. You're a stubborn one, aren't you? Just like my Martha was. When she decided a thing was so, the world had to move around her. Max let out a low, huffing breath. He leaned his weight just slightly against Elias's leg. In that moment, a silent pact was formed. Elias knew that if the dog stayed out here, he would be a statue of ice by morning. And he knew that if the boy in 204 didn't hear a reason to come back, he wouldn't. The night deepened. The slow burn of the storm turned into a roar. Inside the hospital, the lights flickered as the backup generators groaned to life. Elias spent the next 4 hours in a state of calculated rebellion. He moved a heavy industrial heater from the maintenance shed to the alcove just outside the doors, angling it toward the dog. He brought out a thick, wool-lined moving blanket and draped it over Max's shoulders. The dog accepted these things with a grave dignity. He ate the bits of ham Elias had pinched from the staff fridge, but he never took his eyes off the window. Around midnight, the rising action of the crisis began. Sarah came down to the lobby, her face pale. "His stats are dropping, Elias," she whispered. "The doctors are calling it failure to thrive. Physically, the hypothermia damage is healing, but he won't wake up. It's like he's still under the ice." His parents, they're devastated. They're sitting in there in silence, just watching the monitor. Elias looked at Max. The dog had stood up. He was whining now, a low, guttural sound that vibrated in the chest. He sensed it. He knew the boy was drifting further out into the dark water of the unconscious. "He needs to see him," Elias said. "You know the rules?" "Elias, dogs aren't allowed in the ICU, especially not a stray-looking shepherd covered in road salt." "He's not a stray," Elias snapped, his voice cracking. "He's the anchor. Look at him, Sarah. He's been sitting in a blizzard for 72 hours. You think a no-pets sign means a damn thing to a soul like that?" Sarah looked at the dog, then at the storm outside, then back at the old man, whose eyes were bright with a sudden, fierce purpose. "The administrator left for the night? The night supervisor is in the basement dealing with a burst pipe." Elias didn't wait for more. He grabbed a handful of towels from the linen cart. "Help me dry him off. We're going up." The journey through the hospital was a clandestine operation. They used the freight elevator, the one used for laundry and heavy equipment. Max stood perfectly still, his tail occasionally brushing against the metal walls. He seemed to understand the need for silence. He walked with a limp, his own joints stiff from the cold, but his head was held high. As they reached the second floor, the antiseptic smell of the hospital seemed to agitate the dog. He began to huff, his nostrils flaring. He knew the scent. He knew the boy was close. They reached the door to room 204. Through the glass, Elias could see the parents, a young couple, exhausted and broken, holding each other in the corner of the room. The boy, Leo, looked impossibly small in the center of the high-tech bed. The only sound was the hiss-click of the ventilator and the steady, haunting beep, beep, beep of the EKG. Elias pushed the door open. The father looked up, his eyes widening in confusion. What is this?" "I'm sorry to intrude," Elias said softly, stepping aside. "But someone has been waiting a very long time to see your son." Max didn't wait for an invitation. He didn't bark. He walked to the side of the bed, his claws clicking softly on the linoleum. He put his front paws up on the railing, his large head hovering over the boy's chest. The climax of the night felt as though the very air in the room had thickened. Max let out a long, shuddering sigh and rested his chin directly on Leo's motionless hand. He began to lick the boy's fingers, slow, rhythmic, warm strokes. "Get him out of here!" A young resident doctor shouted, appearing at the door. "This is a sterile environment." "Wait," Sarah said, stepping in front of the doctor. "Look at the monitor." The beep, beep, beep had changed. It was faster. Leo's mother gasped. She grabbed her husband's arm. On the bed, the boy's pale fingers, still damp from the dog's tongue, began to curl. They hooked into the thick gray and black fur of Max's neck. A small, ragged moan escaped the boy's lips. It wasn't a cry of pain. It was the sound of someone finding their way home in the dark. "Leo?" his mother whispered, rushing to the bedside. "Leo, honey, can you hear me?" The boy didn't open his eyes yet, but his head turned toward the warmth. He buried his face in the dog's neck. Max let out a soft whimper, a sound of such profound relief that Elias had to turn away to wipe his eyes. The doctor stood frozen, his hand still on the doorframe. The falling action began as the clinical tension of the room dissolved into a raw, human miracle. The machines were still there. The snow was still screaming against the glass. But the will had returned. The boy was no longer under the ice. He was holding onto a friend. Over the next hour, the hospital staff, usually so rigid, seemed to collectively decide to look the other way. Nurses brought a bowl of water for Max. Someone brought a proper dog bed. Though Max refused to leave the side of the hospital cot, Elias sat in the plastic chair in the hallway, his duty done. His knees ached more than ever, and his uniform was damp and smelled of wet dog. But he felt a lightness in his chest he hadn't known since his own wife had passed away 5 years prior. As the sun began to rise, the storm finally broke. The world outside was a pristine, blinding white. The resolution came with the morning shift change. The hospital administrator arrived at 7 a.m., prepared to fire whoever had allowed a dog into the ICU. But when he walked into room 204, he saw a sight that stopped the reprimand in his throat. Leo was awake. He was propped up on pillows, sipping water through a straw. And Max, old, tired, and finally warm, was fast asleep on the floor, his head resting on the boy's slippers. The boy's hand was draped over the side of the bed, his fingers tangled in the dog's ear. Elias was standing by the window, watching the snowplows clear the parking lot. "Thorn," the administrator said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I assume you have an explanation for this breach of protocol." Elias turned, a tired smile on his face. He was just waiting for his friend, sir. And as it turns out, his friend was waiting for him too. Sometimes the best medicine doesn't come in a syringe. It comes with 4 legs and a lot of heart. The administrator looked at the boy and the dog for a long moment. He sighed, checked his clipboard, and looked back at Elias. "Make sure someone walks him. And for heaven's sake, get that dog some proper food from the kitchen. Steak if we have it." Months later, when the snow had melted and the coastal flowers were in bloom, a local newspaper in Oak Haven ran a small story. It featured a photo of a young boy running through a park, a German shepherd with a white muzzle trotting faithfully at his heels. In the background of the photo, sitting on a park bench, was an old man in a security guard's uniform, watching them with a look of quiet contentment. The moral of the story was clear to anyone who saw them. Loyalty isn't just an emotion, it's a tether. It's the thing that keeps us from drifting away when the world turns cold. And sometimes it takes an old dog and an old man to remind us that as long as someone is waiting for us in the snow, we can always find our way back to the light.